Welcome to the FML Podcast, the podcast on a mission to uncover actionable insights, explore the latest trends, and to catalyze your fintech's growth. Join Growth Gorilla's founder and managing director, Sachdev, and some of fintech's hardest-hitting marketers and leaders.
Welcome everyone to today's episode of the FML Podcast. Today we're joined by Maria Tsarkova, Growth Lead at Tandem Bank. Maria, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Shamir. I'm glad to be here.
Amazing. So for everyone listening, could you just share a bit about yourself and your journey so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So currently I oversee growth and acquisition at Tandem Bank, which is a challenger bank that helps consumers spend a little bit greener. I joined Tandem in March this year following the acquisition of Loop Money, a B2C fintech that I worked for the past 2 years almost. I joined Loop as a growth lead at a prototype stage and helped them build their go-to-market plan, roll it out, scale, eventually leading to acquisition by Tandem. Prior to that, I worked with another fintech, startup accelerator, a dating app, and sort of always been involved in very much like early stage business development. I very much enjoy building the companies from scratch. And in my spare time, I'm also a co-founder of a wellness tech business called Solid Water Studio, where we aim to make individually tailored fitness more accessible for everyone.
Amazing. So look, there's so much there that I want to talk about and cover. Kind of a good place to start, really, and almost around the time that we sort of met, because obviously Luke was a client of ours, and it'd be great to kind of hear about the journey from, I suppose, that starting point with Luke, kind of all the way through launching the activity there, you know, what the outcomes were, and then eventually we can then move on to the acquisition by Tandem Bank and your kind of day-to-day role there at the moment. You kind of gave a very, very sort of quick overview as to kind of what Loop Money is. Do you mind sort of giving us a slightly broader overview of the proposition, and then perhaps talk about your initial focus was when joining Loop Money?
So Loop is a money sharing app made for anyone and everyone, but the initial focus was on GenZ market. So essentially you can split money on Loop, widely used by groups like flatmates or people who travel together. You can send money, you can even lend and borrow from your peers. So pretty much everything we do right now with our friends just transferred into an app. So when I joined, as I said, Loop was at a very prototype stage. They were just building the first iteration of the app. It looked completely different from what it is today. It was actually purple, now it's orange. And my goal was basically to develop the go-to-market proposition. So how are we going to launch, what our target audience will be geographically, where are we going to go? Obviously, being an early stage startup, it was a very limited budget as well. So we had to define our channels, media that Growth Gorilla helped with as well. And ultimately decide what kind of messaging, creatives, boil it down to the details.
Amazing. And so I think, how did you sort of walking through the front door, what did your first sort of 30, 60 days look like in terms of developing that kind of go-to-market piece?
Yeah, we really hit the ground running, to be honest. Like when I first joined, Paul Davey, a marketing director, was already on board and heavily involved with brand development. So first thing we did is kind of defined, brand colors, our brand book, kind of what tone of voice we're going to launch with. And obviously that had changed. To say that, you shouldn't spend too much time on this, I think, at the beginning. Surely it's very important to define those things, but you also have to understand that once you launch, everything will change because you will learn from your early adopters that something is just not really working out. So we did a bit of that, but kind of that was the first 3-4 weeks. And then we really started to dive deep into market research that was available. We didn't have huge budgets to kind of go and launch our own market research. So we kind of, used Google, our friend, to understand better the kinds of people that would be interested in the proposition. And ultimately, we narrowed down to students. So we wanted to focus on Gen Z students who share money casually a lot because they are obviously flatmates, they live together. They also often go into overdraft, and instead of going into overdraft, they might prefer to borrow from a friend. But then obviously that's still a very large market, the student market. So we need to boil it down to, well, even more. And we decided to narrow it down geographically. So we had to pick a city that had quite a few students, but wasn't big enough like London, because our budgets were just not enough to get the cut through if we were launching media. So we did quite extensive research, again, mainly through Google, no fancy tools there. And we eventually chose Bristol as our rollout city. And we're really concentrating on tailoring our media strategy on that city.
What did the initial marketing mix look like? And why did you choose to go for that marketing mix?
Gen Z are very digital savvy. They're a digital first kind of audience. So it was only expected that we're going to try a lot of digital channels, and in the marketing mix, the usuals, Meta, Google, but also really wanted to focus on TikTok because at that point it was really growing. I think they just launched their paid proposition at this point. We really wanted to test it out. But we also wanted to do some offline stuff because I think I was personally really inspired by what a dating app called Thursday was doing at the time. They did a lot of stunts around like Liverpool Street that just went viral, organically, because they were just so fun that people were taking pictures of them, posting them on LinkedIn, on Instagram. And that gave a massive shout out to the app just, for free. So we wanted to do something similar. We planned some guerrilla marketing stunts in Bristol, which I personally participated in. It was freezing cold outside. We got some fun pictures of that. We also employed student micro-influencers. So we really understood early on that our app, it naturally lends itself to virality because you cannot really do anything alone on Loop. You need to share money with someone. But we need to get people talking and inviting their friends onto Loop. And what better way to do it is, by a friend recommending you the app. We wanted to really employ students, friends, and then for them to get talking, not just on social media, but also offline about Loop and inviting their friends. So that's essentially what we did. 10 student micro-influencers with a following of about 1,000 to 2,000 followers, nothing huge. They're unprofessional influencers. They were posting like once or twice a week for a month about Loop, and also using Loop a lot, like kind of promoting it around campus. So we were testing this, penetrating a micro community from an offline perspective. And I must say that worked really well in terms of spreading the word. And then the last point was when we organized the events in Bristol University, and these were within the university itself, so kind of almost like student fair kind of situation, and also doing a pub stand where we sponsored some beer, basically put some beer money towards student drinks. And then by that point, thanks to all the digital activity that we were doing and also some of the micro-influencing, a lot of people would approach us and be like, oh, we saw you on TikTok, or we heard a mate talking about you, or we already have the app. So actually at that point, the event kind of served as a validation of the proposition rather than acquisition, which, was really cool.
You mentioned sort of TikTok, and you're right. It was a couple of years back. And I think it was at the point where, like you said, the paid ads facility on TikTok, it's kind of just launched. Everyone was still very, very much in this testing phase. I don't think anyone had really kind of like nailed down or worked out 100% that, native videos were kind of like the best way forward. And it was still very, very sort of early stages. I'd be interested to kind of hear about your journey with TikTok and kind of how you started testing the platform. And if you were to do it again today, kind of perhaps what would you do differently?
No, for sure. TikTok has become like almost number one platform for us now. And I'm very glad we started testing it out back then. And at a certain point, I think around like May 2021, we became the number one fintech on TikTok and like trends. If I had to boil it down, so that was organic content strategy. And basically, we didn't have a very predefined content calendar. Essentially what we did, we employed some interns who were students themselves. And I think that was the best thing to do, because obviously who else would know how to talk to Gen Z about all things money and finance than not them. And they created our content strategy. And we were testing a bunch of hypotheses. We were doing trends that were viral on TikTok. We were also doing some of more educational stuff. We tried to copy the already successful apps on TikTok. And eventually we kind of worked out what really worked for us on the organic side. And then we also decided to go into influencer marketing. We launched in March 2021. But I think influencing, we started testing around August to September. And I think that was the best thing to do. So we approached 3 influencers. One was a lifestyle influencer. The other one was specifically focusing on finance. And the third one was focusing on everything student related, like student life, student problems. And we wanted to see whether a proposition would resonate with their audiences. And what we did, we didn't just let the influencers do their thing. We also sponsored those posts through Spark ads. And I think by now, this is like such a common strategy. Everyone knows about it. Everyone talks about it. But back then, not many people were doing that. Not many people were taking that kind of influencer content and boosting it and using its Spark ads. And that worked so well in terms of the awareness that we got. In terms of app install campaigns, and if we're going more technical, TikTok wasn't so great as a platform back then. It's heavily improved right now, let's say. But we were driving traffic to the landing pages. And what we saw is that the traffic that was coming from those landing pages, after people would have seen the influencer creative, was then much better at retention. So those customers were well retained by Loop because of that, I guess, peer-to-peer recommendation effect of TikTok influencer. So compared to like even the other platforms like classic Meta, where we were getting like quite big volumes of acquisition, TikTok was still winning.
That's really interesting, and I think that was a lot. I think a lot of that was down to the audience that you were going after. Because I think 2 years ago, TikTok, it was a very, very different platform from what it is today. Now TikTok's, trying to take a bite out of Meta, in terms of their audiences and whatnot. But at that point, it was absolutely perfect for your audience, really. Like, I think if you'd launched a year earlier without TikTok, it would have been a completely different story, really.
No, I remember when we were first defining our targeting, not all the UK cities were even on the map for TikTok. You could target London. I think you could target Bristol and then like Manchester, and that's pretty much it. You had to target the whole country pretty much.
At that sort of time, we'd only first sort of just started getting clients onto TikTok, and everyone was very sort of reluctant to do it because obviously Meta was a constant. And then, when we did sort of say, look, to people, let's have a go at TikTok, we were testing out all sorts of ad types, and it was, I think at one point they were allowing static ads on TikTok, which obviously didn't work. And then, we were testing animated videos and GIFs and all sorts of stuff to try and sort of see what the recipe was. And like you said, eventually kind of everybody kind of went towards that native piece, that UGC type content, and then boosting it via Spark ads or directly from their channel as well. So I think, kind of moving along that journey, I think, from what I recall, there was quite a steep target in terms of numbers that needed to be hit. From our recollection, we hit that number. Once you kind of sort of demonstrate that there was a demand for the product, do you think at that point you had product market fit, or do you think there was still sort of, work that needed to be done on the app?
I think when we first launched, our CPA was 20 times what it is now. So a long way from there. But I think when you launch, it's so important, even if you have done it like as a marketeer, 20 times before and you launched in that industry, it's important to understand that no launch is going to be like the previous one. Even if you kind of have a roadmap in your head and you nailed all the channels before, it might not work this time. So, and that's down to so many things, to product, to audience, to product market fit. So we launched, we hit our kind of target in mind, but at the same time, a lot of problems have surfaced from a product side, from a marketing perspective. Not all of our messaging that we thought is going to resonate had actually resonated. It was not bringing the acquisition at the rate that we wanted it. And then on the app itself, we saw that certain journeys were not working as well as they should be, which is normal for sort of a seed startup. And, as a marketer, you should just have a mindset of that's how it's going to be. And even if you work really hard on building a certain strategy, you have to be very agile in your thinking and be able to pivot very quickly, whichever way the app is going. So I think what we did after Bristol, we took 3 months for that initial kind of acquisition push. And then we paused everything and we kind of, revised all the learnings that we got from it, from a marketing perspective, from a product perspective. There were quite a few things that we wanted to fix on the product side. So we took the next 2 months over summer when also students were on holiday. So it was good timing from the acquisition perspective to fix some of those journeys. And I think that's the most important thing you should do in a startup from, again, marketing and product perspective is listen to that early adopter customer. And again, you might not have that much money for customer research, but we found some creative ways to kind of to get those opinions from our customers. For example, when we were at universities talking to students, we would loop them beer money, like £3-5, in exchange for kind of a 20-15-minute talk with them about the app. And that did two things. We obviously got their impression of the app and the opinions on the app, but also we kind of showed them how to use the app, the occasions in which it could be used, and that really improved the retention as well. So, coming up with those creative ways to get the customer opinions is very important, I think. And then obviously implementing those, because sometimes, especially, if you are an experienced growth marketeer or a product manager, you might have certain set opinions of how things should work. And then you're hit by reality, but you still deny that reality. They're like, no, Meta should be working for acquisition, or no, that kind of product feature should be well received. But you need to kind of take a step back and what the data is really showing to us. And I think that's what happened with Loop. So we looked at data and we really tried to implement it.
And then kind of when you relaunched, what sort of key changes did you make in your marketing activity? That has ultimately resulted in, like you said, your acquisition costs reducing significantly. What do you think the big levers were and the big, implementations that you made that contributed to that?
As any startup, when we first launched, we were laser focused on acquisition, on conversion. All the campaigns were set for conversion, no awareness pieces, no budget is wasted on that, but it's a difficult balance to strive when you first launch, when you need to build a brand. And especially as a fintech, you need to build trust. People are putting money towards your app. You need to really be very transparent and build that trust from your consumer. But at the same time, you need to hit those targets, which is, hard as it is. But I think what was very important, what we did differently in autumn, is that we actually, again, took a step back and were like, we need to show the customer what we're about as a brand, and before we convince them to download and use the app. So we launched some awareness pieces. And as I said, the TikTok influencer pieces were kind of key to that. And we weren't leading consumers straight to download pages into the app stores. We were leading them to the landing page where we would tell a bit more about the app prior to asking them to download. And we saw a very good improvement in retention thanks to that. I mean, obviously, as I said, a lot of product fixes have been done following all the feedback that we received. So it was a combined effort from marketing and product. But I think, the biggest learning for me from that is that even, as an early stage startup with limited budgets, with very steep targets, you need to think about the brand and what you stand for. And especially in Gen Z market, it's kind of expected now that you should have a mission as a brand and you should share it. And you can find creative ways to do it. I mean, obviously, it organic. Social media was a great supporter of that influencer push, because people could then, even if they didn't go to the landing page directly, they could go to our account, see all the content that we were putting out, and then proceed to download, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that awareness piece was very important.
I'd be interested to hear, and I kind of want to sort of link this into the acquisition piece by Tandem. As a first starting point, I mean, are you aware of what the business motivation was by Tandem to acquire Loop? Was it about the product features? Was it about the customer base? Or was it kind of a bit of everything there?
Yeah, I think it was a bit of everything. So Tandem, as a bank, it has 4 products, and only one of them is direct to consumer. So that's the savings app that they offer. It seems that Tandem's target audience is sort of slightly older than Loop's, but from their company's strategy perspective, they really wanted that access to Gen Z market as well. And they really wanted to also spread their proposition into a more fintechy kind of world. So I think in that sense, Loop really allowed that. So now they do have access to that Gen Z consumer that might not be immediately interested in what Tandem has to offer in terms of products. Like maybe they're not, building their savings yet. Maybe they're not taking out any mortgages yet. But what it does is familiarizes that audience with the brand. And then eventually when they, do come to take out their first mortgage, that's the kind of the first company they will think about.
Has your role changed? And if it has changed, how so?
Yeah, before we came on board to Tandem, growth marketing role didn't really exist. So I'm in the process of defining it essentially for this business. And obviously, our roles had changed a lot, because instead of focusing on just one product and one proposition, now we're focusing on 5, and that's very different. And the way you manage your time and how you think about it is very different, but extremely exciting, I must say, because also as a marketeer, being able to work on the B2B side and the direct to consumer side is incredible. The experience that you get. I've started off by also focusing very heavily on the MarTech, on the analytics side of things, which was very well done on the Loop side. And we slowly are implementing it into Tandem as well, building that North Star KPI focus for marketing and everything growth and acquisition. That's extremely important for me. Always been I'm an analytics nerd. So, but yeah, Tandem is different also in the sense that it is a regulated bank. Loop was, although a fintech, was not regulated. So it has been a shift in terms of the content we produce, how we produce it, the ads, everything has to go for compliance. So obviously had to make friends with compliance, and the way the marketing role functions is slightly different. But yeah, as I said, amazing experience.
Compliance comes up a lot when we're talking to prospects and clients about influencer marketing in particular. Were there any sort of reservations by Tandem's compliance team to kind of adopt the influencer piece that has been working so well with Loop? How did you kind of manage to educate them and get around that and continue with doing that?
Well, I think the most important thing is not you in compliance is your enemy. Work with them side by side from the early days when you start thinking about certain campaigns. Explain your aims. We've already had a history, of influencer marketing, of TikTok marketing in general. So we had something to go off from. We showed them the results. We showed them the kind of creatives and messages that we were using, and also just for them, they knew that we are sensible enough not to do something completely crazy. And obviously that has been, we needed to put some effort in and being educated on, what is right, what we can do, what we cannot do. Prior to that, I've never worked in a regulated fintech. So yeah, I took time to understand what should be said, what can be said, etc. And yeah, I think just approaching it as working as a team instead of me versus you.
Was there anything that you were allowed to do that you're no longer allowed to do, or is it a case that you managed to educate compliance and compliance has managed to educate you and there hasn't been an impact?
On the Loop side, I think we're freer to do certain things because Loop remains its own brand. So it's powered by Tandem, but it's not Tandem, if it makes sense. So yes, we've been given much more freedom on Loop based on the, again, showing them the learnings that we've had, showing what prior campaigns we've done. We really didn't have that many restrictions at this point on what we can or cannot do for Loop. For Tandem, on the other side, yes, it's a bit less risky, the approaches that we are taking, but that's where a lot of learning is happening right now. So Tandem historically has been very traditional in their messaging, and we are trying to push some boundaries there, and that's where compliance and us, we sit down, we show them, for example, the messages that we want to go out with. We also come with a case showing like maybe some competitors have done something similar very successfully. And then we try and, come up with a way in which that will work for Tandem.
Kind of backtracking a tad slightly, obviously, you're still pretty new and pretty fresh to Tandem. And one thing that you mentioned was that you're kind of still defining that growth role as it stands at the moment. I'd be really, really curious to hear, what does that definition piece look like? And how are you trying to, encourage Tandem to take a more of a growth-focused approach with their marketing activity?
Marketing in traditional banks has been a very different function to a growth marketing position in a startup. Essentially, a growth marketing position in a startup is, well, everyone in a startup is a very important person, but that's the person who is also responsible for your CPA, for your analytics, for sometimes defining some of your KPIs. Whereas traditionally in a bank, that's more of like the brand support. So coming into Tandem, there has been a little bit of that shift where marketing now gets involved in everything and anything. Product development and data and analytics and digital journey, and then also actively proposes new ways in which Tandem can grow. So instead of taking like a bit of a backseat and receiving different tasks from different business areas, like we need that presentation done, we need a new landing page done, we take a more active role there, and we come up with the growth strategies and growth plans for each specific product, and then go to the respective managing directors, get approval, set up tests, test and learn approach, source the relevant data infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of the approach that we as a team have been taking. And I think that's what every bank should really do.
You talked a lot about sort of defining the role and how you feel, what approach, banks should take. There's kind of one bit that I did want to touch upon was, you mentioned that you're a bit of a data nerd, and I'd be really interested to hear how you're kind of taking that data-driven, decision-making approach now that you're within Tandem Bank, and, what that means for the future of marketing activity for Tandem. So, yeah, it'd be great to hear about that.
Yeah, I guess the first big project I took over is the MarTech implementation for Tandem. So at Leap, we've been very lucky to have had like access to some of the best software from pretty much the launch stage. So talking about like Mixpanel, AppsFire, all the robust analytics systems that you can imagine. Obviously, all very seamlessly integrated with the CRM systems, push notifications, etc. And we wanted to kind of bring it for Tandem as well. So that's part of one ecosystem. Obviously, it's very different when you're already a well-functioning bank, big book, and many, many customers. So it's a big project to undertake, and it's still progressing. And as part of that, we're bringing the app analytics, we're bringing more robust automation systems. So like the marketing function could define the whole customer journey and really see the customer across all of Tandem's products and make sure that we can cross-sell, help the customer understand us better, et cetera, et cetera. What we're also doing is, well, you probably have noticed recently that in the past like 2-3 years, most of the fintechs that emerge, they're really driven by missions. And these are the fintechs that are very, very successful. And Tandem is driven by a big mission on sustainability and a greener lifestyle and everything it has to do with finance. So another thing that we're doing is thinking through how this can surface from our branding perspective. And that's including content strategy, creating new digital spaces for our customers where they can learn about green finance, because it became sort of a buzzword in the fintechy world, but no one really understands what it means and how a bank such as Tandem can help you on that journey. We're also building new customer journeys and obviously, as I said, setting up analytics to track those and kind of creating that sales cycle across customer lifetime value. That's work from the product and brand perspective, and it's also work like a huge push from data and analytics world.
And so I suppose that kind of leads me on to sort of final question, really, which is, what does the future hold for Tandem and Loop?
Being a very mission-driven business, as I said, which consumers, Gen Zs especially, but honestly, all the consumers across all ages now turn to. Tandem will go from strength to strength in terms of the propositions that it offers. Very excited for next year. There will be a lot of new product launches. And I think with Loop, it will be a really great proposition that spreads across all the target audiences.
Well, Maria, it's been absolutely fantastic speaking with you. Before I let you go, we'll go through our quick fire round. So what podcasts are you listening to right now?
Well, this one. And I mean, I also listen to Diary of the CEO by Stephen Bartlett, not religiously, but some of the episodes I do really like. And then one that's not connected to fintechs is the Daily Poem. That's one I try to listen every day. I love poetry.
Other than Loop and Tandem Bank, what's your favorite fintech app or company?
I like what Cheddar are doing. I also like Algebra, another savings proposition, very mission-led. So these are two that I've been following quite religiously.
And what books are you currently reading or would you recommend?
I'm currently reading Gravitas, which is a public speaking book, which I would recommend for anyone who wants to kind of do more of public speaking, and that has been an ambition of mine to participate more in podcasts, conferences, and kind of share my knowledge. So that's one I would recommend.
What's one thing that I haven't asked you that I perhaps should have?
If you want to become a growth marketeer and work in a fintech, what your approach should be, how can you become one, basically?
Yeah, it'd be great to hear your perspective. Give us your advice.
When I was graduating from university, certainly there was kind of this idea that you have to go and work for a big corporate, do a grad scheme, and build your career there from the ground up. And that's the way you get the best experience. And I always challenge this. And I think you should go and work for smaller companies, startups, niche agencies. And that's where you really get that expertise as a marketeer. You work, hands-on across different channels, different areas of business, and you ultimately become a great expert. And that's the way that leads you to become a growth marketeer with a focus not just on brand building or certain areas of marketing, but on really growing that business.
It's great advice. Thank you very, very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much. Likewise.
The FML Podcast is brought to you by Growth Gorilla. To find out how our marketing growth experts can boost your fintech's growth, head to growthgorilla.co.uk and make sure to search for the FML Podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Growth Gorilla, thanks for listening.